Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and I'm your host, Sean Dustin. I got a documentary filmmaker here for you guys tonight. He did a documentary called Kybalion. His name's Ronni. Shit, I forget his last name. I don't know. So bad. Let me see what it is. Ronni Thomas. There you go. Had to go back to the old email. So yeah, Ronni Thomas is going to be here talking to me this evening. There's not much to go over. I mean, you from the last one that I did, number 150, where I talked about my COVID experience over the holidays and how that went for me. Not good, but I'm still here. I'm alive. I made it, so it wasn't too bad. I mean, I've been sicker, but it wasn't the best experience either. So I'm glad I made it. A lot of people getting sick right now, though. It's crazy. So we'll be back with Ronni right after the intro.
Sean Dustin spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. Upon release in 2006, he had nothing but the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and legal paperwork. In 2010, he kicked a long-time methamphetamine habit and started the long climb back up the ladder of life. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. If you want transparency and authenticity, you're in the right place. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and this is Sean Dustin.
Love the suspense there. What's up, Ronni?
How are you, man? So nice to hook up like this, especially on the eve of the film's release. It was, tomorrow the film comes out officially, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. I didn't even think about that, but you planned it that way.
Oh yeah, no. When Sylvia hooked us up, I was, and it was our mutual friend, we should say, and I said, "Oh wow, yeah." I mean, if we could have some good energy before it's so weird to release a film in these times. And I've had other friends who've had their films released, it used to be, and I've had other things I've done. I mostly make short films, but it's usually like you release it at a festival and there's people around and there's things. I was telling my wife yesterday, like, what do we do? Like, what's the so like somebody presses a button. This is modern, film release. Somebody at Amazon, or not even like a mechanical android kind of just sets it out into the open and says, "Hey, give me such amount of money and you can watch it." It's a little weird, So I thought maybe we'd go over I don't know. It's an odd time to release a film.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, it's a lot of things are. I mean, even right now, with the limited severity of Omicron. I mean, it seems like they're trying to take us back to March of 2020.
Yeah, well, here in New York, it was a different story. I mean, I don't think people quite understand how dark. I don't get scared very. So I was one of those like, it'll blow. And I publicly said things like, I criticize South by Southwest, and I stand by that, because I think they should have at least reimbursed the people who were meant to attend their festival. But it'll blow over, it'll this or that, and then you heard those sirens all night, and like every day you had people saying, "Oh yeah, my dad, died. My cousin, then my sister got, and she has lupus," and we were like, "Oh shit." So it was a totally different reality here, and with friends in Italy, that and I had to finish this film and the Breaking Bad series I did, which is funny that when you're talking about methamphetamines and drug addiction. So we can talk about both things. But I had two major projects that just boom, like it actually worked out really great for me, because all I could do was spend time behind my computer figuring out how to edit while the world is collapsing around me.
Yeah, right.
I'm just like, oh man, actually this is kind of like a good, like, it's terrible. And like every friend of mine who had like a parent or a friend or a spouse or anything, and that was a reality here. I mean, it was terrifying. And then here I am, just like, kind of like that Twilight Zone episode, like I have all the time in the world. Like I could just finish my film, finish my series, come up with new ideas. So you lived in this weird paradox of good and bad, like, which is in a lot of ways what the film is about. It's, this paradoxical nature of the universe, right?
Yeah.
There's no real control of that. So it was certainly a weird time to finish, but an appropriate time to finish the film.
Yeah, 2020 was kind of the same for me. I spent it in my fifth wheel, 40-foot fifth wheel. It's got 5 slide outs, and I was living in that. And I hardly ever left it. All I did was interview people all day long for the podcast, and I mean, I was doing 16 a week, and sometimes 12, and I was just. I mean, it was like exercising.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Is the routine, the exercise, getting out there and, kind of constantly honing what you do, and having the ability to do that without external influence. So you can actually focus on, and you're forced to focus. Like, I'm the type of person who lacks. I'm undiagnosed ADHD. I'm a child of the 80s. We didn't have it necessarily back then. And if we did, it wasn't pervasive. And so being forced to mitigate between your, call it a disability, I call it an advantage, with the world that we're living in. So sit there, work, do what you have to do. Otherwise, you're going to suffocate. And then, we managed to make this crazy film. I don't take all the credit. I had a fantastic crew behind me, as with all the things that I do, but in the end, it's your name that gets attached to it. The same as, well, you're doing this all by yourself, it seems. I'm sure you have friends and family helping you out, but
nope.
In a film, it is.
Really? Nope. Right. Just all myself. Most of them, my family doesn't even listen to it. They don't want to hear. They don't want to hear my crazy ass.
It is so hard to get people to acknowledge content. Like, my best friend has not watched my film. And I think sometimes that's because it's like, I haven't read my best friend's books, it's like, because you kind of know the material because you're going through it with them. Yeah. So I have, a lot of friends who are authors, and I don't read their books because
that's a commitment.
I was there when you were writing it.
Well, that's a commitment to read a book. To commit to reading a book is a commitment. And it's like, there's so much more content that's readily available to view or listen to in a podcast format. You know what I mean? Where every time, when I was in prison, I read like over 300 books. And
I love reading.
When I got out, I was like, I don't want to read no more books, because it was just,
I love it.
I had nothing better to do. I don't have when I read a book now, or try to, it puts me to sleep.
See, I love it. I do a lot more audiobooks than I care to admit, but I still I like the content, and I'm insatiably curious. I can't stop. Right now I'm reading about, quantum gravity, but it's really amazing. This guy, Carlo Rovelli, is an Italian. I'd say he's a philosopher, but he's a physicist as well. And he talks about the nature of reality, which is obviously a core theme to everything in my life. And, maybe you've had these moments. If you were attracted to the film, I'd imagine you're at least curious about where the borders of reality are.
Yeah.
And where, like, reality, and if you can call it surreality and non-reality. And these, like, kind of wacky boundaries between the normal, everyday goings on of things. We wake up, we brush our teeth, unless you're my 17-year-old, and we kind of just go about our business, whether it's making films or doing a podcast or existing as just a human being, and whatever that means, and walking your dog and making sure that they're fed. It's reality is kind of a tricky place to live when you're conscious and aware of your consciousness, right?
Well, human beings are what's the word I'm looking for? We're routine. You know what I mean? We like to know what the next thing's going to be. You know what I mean? The safety of knowing, what's going to happen next, the familiarity of knowing what's going to happen next. And that's why a lot of people tend to choose the evil they know versus the evil they don't. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it's familiar. I know what to expect over here.
I prefer chaos, and I've always preferred chaos. And I create chaos where chaos need not be. Just because, I had a frictional relationship with my family as a middle child. Even that's routine. Mm-hmm. You're the kind of, the cops were always showing up at the house because I needed to assert I wasn't the older boy, like the star child, and I wasn't the younger girl. I was right in the middle. And my mother even admitted, she's like, we just wanted a boy and a girl. We had a boy, another boy, then our girl. And you were just kind of the leftover byproduct. And I give her credit for that. And I love and respect her for that because I knew that. But it gave me an appreciation for chaos, which I think the universe, not to go too hippy dippy, but the universe prefers chaos. We think of things as very ordered, but really the amount of possibilities are so endless when it comes to the universe and even just our solar system, our galaxy. A giant asteroid could come flying out of nowhere, clip our planet and send us off course, but it doesn't seem to happen that way. I just did a series on astronomy for the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. And the one thing, my issue I have no issue with science. In fact, I love science. And I'm not like an anti-science person at all, but I don't think that science and spirituality or science and I don't know what else you'd call it need to ever intersect. I think they can work parallel. I think that science can be here and whatever it is that's kind of conscious or spiritual can be here and they don't have to meet ever. And
true science, not scientism.
Right, exactly. We got on the subject of atheism and I said, and I'm a lapsed Catholic or I'm a recovering Catholic, whatever you call it.
Me too.
But I have a deep appreciation for certain aspects of Catholicism, but it's mostly aestheticism that I appreciate. But what I realized in talking to these people is let's not talk about God, because that word in itself has such a negative connotation. Like, forget God. What if we just said, can you accept the concept of intelligent design? Or not? And I accept that. I accept the potentiality for intelligent design, that what we're in was engineered by something higher than we are. And it's not bearded white man in the sky. But you say God and people, he's a religious fanatic. Like nowadays, that's what you do. You get kind of hooked on these buzzwords instead of hooked on the, let's get past, go back to communication's breaking down right now. Mm-hmm. We're in the Tower of Babel because you can't, it's very hard to communicate an idea without it being extrapolated in so many ways. Language was supposed to get simpler, and instead it's gotten more complicated. Mm-hmm. That's where I think the symbolic world becomes really important to me. So instead of saying God, you say a higher power. Mm-hmm. You say a higher power, people say, oh, you mean God. So we're stuck in this feedback loop.
No, I mean the universe.
No, I mean, right, exactly, the universe. So you mean so it's like New Agey. No, it's not New Age. It's indefinable. And there's not a scientist on Earth who can explain what consciousness is. And the best way that I've heard it explained is consciousness is the universe experiencing itself, which I think is kind of a beautiful, poetic way of understanding it's the universe. Well, we're made of...
Yeah, we're made of everything.
Made of the stuff of the universe.
Yeah.
And we're conscious of the fact that we're made of all that stuff. So we're just the universe kind of experiencing itself. It's, it's as good as an explanation as I can find.
Well, I mean,
I'm not a scientist.
But you can go through all the different, civilizations and what are we? How did we get here? I don't buy the ape theory. I don't buy it at all. I don't think that we evolved from monkeys and apes or whatever you want to call it. There's no way.
I think physiologically maybe, but I think again you have to think. If you think of ourselves as a lot of different components, right? So like if we're a physiological entity that, evolved from some form of primitive ape in our physical body, but then how does that explain consciousness? Mm-hmm. How does that explain the awareness of who we are? So it gets really complicated, and I have zero beliefs. Like I don't believe anything because I think that belief is kind of a shortcut. Like if you firmly believe something, then it's dogmatic, right? Then you can't escape that belief.
Yeah,
you have to be open to the fact that things are changing constantly, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I at some points think that like if you separate human consciousness, and I occasionally think of the human brain as organic material that receives information from elsewhere. And we talk about these themes in the film that like, it's what I guess you'd call non-local consciousness. So you, Sean, are sitting there experiencing the world as a physical human being, but you're also, there's an alternative version of yourself. And anyone who's taken psychedelic drugs, which, I'm not ashamed to admit that I do, yeah, you experience it, I'm going to backtrack. Psychedelic substances, because I don't consider them drugs. And I don't think it's fair that they're considered drugs because they're I don't know anyone who's addicted to mushrooms or anyone who's addicted to DMT or addicted to LSD.
Yeah, a good trip will make you, it's not going to make you want to do more. That's for sure. It's going to make you sit on it for a minute. What did I just go through?
But doesn't that make you think, and if you, I understand you've done mushrooms and, your relationship with methamphetamines, I imagine, was a much more destructive. It's almost like, the beings in the cave. It was a Plato or Aristotle who had to fit, just looking at the wall, watching the flickering of the lights and your shadows, instead of the complete reversal of that, which I think psychedelics, not to advocate for psychedelics, because there's a lot of people it shouldn't be for, but I think the right combination of psychedelics can awaken something in you that will, like get you moving forward in a path that's only yours. It doesn't have to be anybody else's,
The best way I can explain what you just said was one is evil and one is love.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Psychedelics, whenever I have taken those, it feels like I'm wrapped in a warm blanket of just like goodness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And well-being and oh man, all right, I feel great. Like I feel safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And methamphetamine it was, I believe, and from what I've experienced, and I've experienced some stuff, where like something was on top of me while I'm trying to wake up, holding me down, and methamphetamine opens the door or the portal for evil entities, evil spirits to come through.
Huh.
Yeah, it's a demonic kind of drug, and I felt that, I felt like I was possessed for a while, and once I got out of that, I was like, it took me a while to go and revisit it and think, look back on certain situations and try to make sense of them.
Yeah, I think we're also putting language like evil's just this kind of term that we've created, right? That doesn't, we use it irresponsibly nowadays and we use it all the time, when it's, we're just looking to vilify people constantly or vilify things constantly, when really it's just the human experience, right? And we're at a stage, I think, in the collective consciousness where we're unable to just be all right with the fact that we're going through the same things our ancestors did in more advanced society. Mm-hmm. and we have more things assaulting us nowadays. Doesn't mean they're evil, they're assaultive. The drug in itself isn't evil. The effect of the drug is incredibly evil, and I've seen it for myself, and I've never expected to see that. Because being from New York City, of course we saw the heroin epidemic, back in the 1980s, but to us, as a kid, everything's a joke, especially if you're like me. And I mean, everything's still a joke to me. I don't take anything too serious. But when you're a kid, it's like, look, we'd play junkie bingo. And there, you'd drive down 42nd Street if we're going to my dad's Christmas party at his office. And it'd be like, oh, we got a junkie, we got a prostitute, we got a guy passed out, we got, and, it's fair to make light of that to some extent, but it's not fair. These are people who are struggling, and they weren't even given the tools that they needed to get through what they got through. Now we're starting to finally realize that, oh, wait, these people are, they've been given poison. Did you see Dope Sick? Have you seen that series? I'm on episode 4. Oh man, does it make your blood boil?
Well, I was hooked on pills, on painkillers for 7 years. And, it, well, I mean, I think there's parallels to that and what's happening right now, with the market.
To me, it's apples and oranges. I mean, like that is like, and I, as a filmmaker, I'm aware that people dramatize things, and they, like you have to. And Michael Keaton, you can't get better. Like you're going to empathize with him. His performance is fantastic. You're going to be drawn in. That's part of the charm of film and the arts, is to kind of like get you on their side. But I think in that situation, especially knowing people like yourself who have gone through it, who you never expected were going to be there. Like one of my best friend's dads, who was like a hero of mine. Like I thought was the greatest guy. And he's so straight and narrow and clean cut. Wound up on heroin because he had taken OxyContin. Yeah. And just like spiraled out. And we were like, what the heck? Like, how could this have happened? And how terrible is this? And there it is. Here's this guy now who's just irreversibly hooked. Yeah. And then you watch something like that. And again, even if maybe it's even hyperbolic, maybe they're just being dramatic, but you can't help but feel sympathy. And when I was doing the series for Breaking Bad, and we were talking to the really hardened police officers, that was pretty nascent with them. And they said they reflected the same thing back, that like, how could, you have to have sympathy for these people. You go from straight A honor student to shooting it out with the police within a matter of 6 months. Something's wrong. Yeah. And you're talking hardcore Midwestern police officials telling me, you have to feel sorry. Like there's something wrong. This is not the place they wanted their lives to end up. So,
yeah, I mean, it was tough. I mean, I was coming out of, 18 years of a meth addiction, and then, 1 year after getting out of prison, starting that thing. And well, now was what was it 1 year? It was a little bit after that. So after 2010, so 4 years after getting out, started playing softball, got injured. Here's the thing is that it was in my my medical record, because I'd been with this particular, Kaiser Permanente for, since I was born. And so it was in there that I was an addict, and she saw that and she said, well, I can prescribe these to you if you'll just sign off that you won't sue us if you get addicted. And so I'm like, yeah. And so I'm like, well, shit, I know what they are and I want them. And so I signed it off, and then it was, there was a point where I was spending $500 extra a month, buying more. And
but Sean, like you went on the roller coaster because you went from highs to lows, right?
well, here's the thing is that I could function on this. That's the difference.
Really?
Methamphetamine, I couldn't function. So I would do it no matter every which way I tried to do it. And trust me, I tried a bunch of different ways to do it. And every time it's just same thing. Boom. You know what I mean? It's just like jumping off, trying to jump further than you can. And you're always going to hit the ground and never hit the water. That's kind of what it was like. And then finally, I just, it is amazing. It's just, there's just, when you get hooked on something, you get hooked on something, and it's really difficult to, I mean, even, when you have some distance away from it, triggers and things like music would always trigger me because I'd spend a lot of time driving my truck, listening to music really loud. And so every time there would, music, it brings you back to places, you know what I mean? Like food's the same thing. And, I couldn't listen to music for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
I just, everybody always say, why are you always listening to talk radio? I just can't listen to music right now.
Yeah. It's funny. I was just talking about music being transportive, where you can just, in my level, and I'm also a musician and I've also been a composer and all this other stuff. And that's just music, but music is my first love. And it's Chuck D just posted on Twitter and I love Chuck D. I love Public Enemy.
Oh yeah.
And he posted, I think it was 1980. And his prediction it was him pointing at a 1980s headline. He said, I predict by the year 2000, there'll be something like 500 record labels and 10 million artists. And it's genius because he's just like he actually undershot his goal. Now we've got like billions of artists and like all I want to do is listen to music and you give me a genre and I can find you something I love in it. I have my favorites. I was a hardcore punk kid, but it's harder as you get older to like sustain that,
Yep.
And I still love it when it's real. Like if you
fight the power.
But that was punk rock to me. And, that said the same thing that Minor Threat said and the Ramones said. It was all the same thing. They were all just, what I think kids need to be doing today. Like my son's generation is you're all fucking wrong, and you're all walking around and like, you can't just admit it. Like you just can't say because it lacks decorum to say we don't know. Nowadays everyone has to know everything instead of, I guess, the old occult ideology of we're learning. Like that's what I like about the occult is the notion that it's alchemy is in a constant state of learning. Mm-hmm. They never reached the final perfection. Science comes from ancient alchemy, right? I mean, chemistry comes from alchemy. That notion of just combining elements and seeing what happens. And we wouldn't have chemistry if it wasn't for alchemy, right?
Yeah.
So we also wouldn't have that if we just said, we know everything now. We have everything figured out. Trust everybody and question nothing. And, my nature is to always go against that. It's, well, no. And in every capacity, like you tell me one thing, I will question, which is, I think, why I'm good at what I do, is because I ask a lot of questions. I feel like in this configuration, I've probably asked you more questions than you've asked me, just because I am curious. And I'm always curious anytime I meet somebody who's fascinating.
Oh, well, we're going to get to some questions here in a minute. So
well, I know, but I do tend to ask a lot of questions.
Well, it's good. I mean, being inquisitive is, it's a good quality. I mean, it doesn't do anybody any good to just follow blindly. You know what I mean? No, there's a lot of bad things happen to people when they just follow things blindly and don't ask any questions.
So if we can agree that Albert Einstein was one of the most brilliant, let's just say, physicists of our time, he would start his essays with, "It seems to me." Now, there's some kind of interesting language there. It seems to me means he's questioning his own hypotheses and his own theories. That is honorable science. It seems to me. And I think Faraday and all the every great scientist, when you theorized, was it seems to me, or it appears to me, or in my from what I've observed. It's always subjective. It's open to flaw, and they always left you with, oh, maybe this is wrong, maybe this isn't quite correct, and there needs adjustments. And so, if Einstein could admit that he was potentially wrong, and he would often say that, his theory of general relativity was the birth child of his theory of special relativity, because it was incomplete. There was a problem with special relativity, and without going into it, he needed to fix that problem. So he came up with general relativity because he questioned himself, and then questioned that, and questioned that. The questions are what motivates a good scientist.
Well, in conversation too. I mean, you got to be able to, that's what, when you start talking about, some of the, like anything, you know what I mean? To be able to debate back and forth and to come to different conclusions and like, oh, okay, maybe I was looking at it wrong, and being open. You have to be open and not set necessarily in your thinking and how, just like you were saying, it's like you can't be so married to something that everything else, you know what I mean? You can't see anything else.
This could all collapse. Everything that we know and perceive and believe could all collapse upon itself at any moment. Entropy, the scientific principle of entropy dictates that. It won't, because it hasn't happened by laws of probability, but it could. Mm-hmm. And that's the quantum reality too. It could collapse. Even science acknowledges like it could potentially go this way. Like it doesn't have to react. Quantum is, there are no definites. The future is indefinable. It's probable, but it's indefinable. So
well, I'll tell you what,
leaving that open.
If the grid went down, shit would start getting real.
See, actually, it's funny you just said that. Like, I actually think that is an interesting way out of where we are. If you want to get dystopian, like I do, because as so I consider myself an optimistic cynic. That I'm extremely optimistic because I believe that we're capable of, we have the potential to love, care, be open, be honest, and be real. But we're assaulted by all these like external factors, right? And if the grid went down and like, let's just say a solar flare, like in 100 years ago, it took down the telegraph. Who fucking cares about the fucking telegraph? You got like 4 lines. You gotta like, it was probably a good thing that the fucking thing went down. Some poor asshole with like perpetual carpal, his ancestral lineage is like pointed finger.
Oh, my fingertips bruised.
And he was like, God, thank God that went. That was a bad idea. I think it would be a similar effect nowadays, where it's just, there would be a period of upheaval because you have a lot of people who have lived a lot of comfort, including ourselves, including a lot of even the lower middle classes. Like, you can't take anything out of that. Like, and then you'll just adjust to a new world, and you'll have to, because you realize, oh shit, this is our kind of design. We have to figure this out somehow, and we create new systems. I don't think it would be apocalyptic. I think it's the best way out, and I don't know why I think that, but I think the best way out is solar flare, take the grid out, and go talk to your neighbor. Make sure that
force people into tribes,
well,
or community. Your neighbors, you know what I mean? So it puts you into more of a well, there's this thing, what is it called? The there's a name for something that we're not supposed to know more than 200 people, or be able to identify 200 people. There's a name for it.
Is it like the 100th monkey?
Yeah, but there's some other name for it. But a part of the problem is that society's gotten way too big and way too impersonal.
Yes.
From our traditional and what we were, how we evolved in smaller tribes and smaller groups, and it works that way. When you start getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and community there's no community. People don't even know who their neighbors are hardly, especially if you live in an apartment.
I live in an apartment with probably 1,000 people. And it's not even, this is, you're talking working class Brooklyn apartment building. Mm-hmm. And when COVID hit really hard here, there were a few people I'd talked to passively. There's an old veteran, this guy Billy, who's a Korean War vet. He's very old, and he was sick to begin with. And I was like, okay, he is paces away from me. Mm-hmm. He's on the second floor on the other side of the building. And I didn't go knock on his door and just say, hey, is everything okay? Like, you don't have to open your door. I'm just checking in on you. And I really felt ashamed of myself when everything had settled that I hadn't done that. And there were other people in the building that I could have just, and this is somebody I'd enjoyed talking to often. His stories I regaled and I thought they were hilarious. He was talking about smoking joints on the roof back in the 1960s. Like, they were really, really, like a guy I really looked forward to seeing. And here it is, and I gave myself a little slack because things were so in such a chaotic state. And here I am, a self-proclaimed chaos master, somebody who loves chaos. And now I'm in a situation where I'm not in charge of the chaos. The chaos is in charge of me.
Yeah.
And my focus in a weird way turned toward my family. And I don't want to say, I say in a weird way, you not knowing my family dynamic, but I'd never, really, I'd done everything I could to kind of disconnect myself from my family. But before the whole end of the world happened, here in New York, I'd been wanting to repair those relationships and wanted to be more, and I'd been close with my brother, my sister, and then even my mom, and to some extent my dad, I wanted to get closer with. And so I shifted I can't explain what it was like in New York without 4 hours, to actually go. It was very, very crazy. It was scary. It was nonstop. And when it came time to getting groceries, I'd be the guy to say, you know what, I'm good. I'll go. I got a pair of balls, and I'll go out there and I'll get the groceries for my mom, my sister, even my brother, who's older than me, because, it's the right thing to do. But yet I didn't knock on my neighbor's door and just say, hey, are you all right? Is everything cool? I hadn't seen him, and I was worried about him even, but I don't know why we do that. I mean, maybe you have some theories on it, but I don't. And I can't get to it. And I like to think of myself as somebody who's bold, who will go out there and knock on somebody's door and say, look, you don't have to answer the door. Do you have what you need to survive? Are you okay? Can I get you something? And I didn't do that. And reflecting on that is difficult because you want to grow and be more perfect. And we're still flawed. I mean, we're still just kind of doing the best we can. Wait for the next pandemic, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can do better then. But hey, at least you're reflecting, and I mean that's growth. You know what I mean? Recognizing our faults and how we showed up poorly, or maybe not the way we wanted to at some point in your day, and then being able to recognize that and reflect back on it and go, hey, you know what? I didn't really like how I showed up there, and I really want to do better next time.
As long as you act on it. And it's not just like, so many people, and I see it in the occult world all the time, and I think I said it earlier, they use the occult and the new age to excuse shitty behavior. And that I can't stand.
And that's a little different.
It really, no, see, but that's, and I see that being kind of a split figure in the occult world. I see a lot of people doing things in the occult space to help bring us towards a more loving collective consciousness, bring people together. And then I see a lot of guys like, well, I'll just, cheat on my wife, leave my wife, I could do this, but because that's what the universe warranted, and why should I ignore the universe's calling? And they go very airy-fairy with this stuff, and it's like, you're just using, I think like Aleister Crowley, who's like a famed occultist.
Yeah,
he's that kind. It's like, like you're just a degenerate. Like you're using ancient, deeply spiritual practices to benefit yourself in a way that, because we're a puritanical society, right? And that's not good. Like we shouldn't be. And I'm against puritanical ways of thinking, but using a system of beliefs to kind of enforce your own shitty belief system, I think is bad. You shouldn't have an agenda.
Well, you see a lot of people.
The universe told me it was okay. No, it's not. That's total bullshit. Like the universe didn't tell you to do something that was going to negatively affect the people that you're around for your own benefit.
Well, there's always going to be predators and there's always going to be prey. And, a lot like, yoga, yogis, that world, you have the other, anytime that you put yourself on like you're up here and you're preaching to your pulpit or your people, and there's always room for people to behave badly, or let it get to their head, or turn it into, to whatever it ends up. It always ends up being that the guy's screwing everybody, and so
right. It's everybody wants to get. It's Stalin, It's that whole communistic principle of, well, we're all on the same. It's China. It's like we're all on the same playing field, except the social elite and whatnot. But that's what, and I mentioned it earlier, why initially I didn't want to do this film was when it was first approached to me. There's a few reasons that I didn't want to do it, was because there's the potential to become guruistic, right? Mm-hmm. Like you don't ever want to do that. And you don't ever see it coming. I think a lot of these cult leaders and a lot of these people who, like we're saying, I don't think it's almost the same as your methamphetamine addiction. Like you don't see it until you realize you're addicted to the attention you're getting from the people you're preaching to. And before you know it, you're Jim Jones, and like there's no other way out of it. But not that I thought that would happen, but
so you're saying is that you don't think that they set out to do that, but through whatever it is and noticing the power that they had over people, it's like, oh, I can do this, or maybe I can do this. Let me try this. You know what I mean? Let me see what I can get away with over here. And
it's absolutely. It's entirely like, look, it's if you could. You can't predict if your podcast was to become the most successful podcast in America. You can't predict what the effect of that would be on you. You don't know. You could say, "Oh, I would just be any old guy. I'd still be Sean, and that's all there would be to it." But you can't predict that. Mm-mm. You may turn into that may be the greatest addiction that you've ever had. That you've got followers, and I think that in a lot of ways that's the world we're living in, is that's the ultimate addiction, is that people listen to what you say and hear what you want to say. And I've always tried to remain being an right. Mm-hmm. Isn't that addictive?
Yeah,
say like, oh, look at
how many followers I have. Look how many followers I have. I just post one thing and I get 30,000 likes. Yeah, it is. You get a little dopamine hit every time you get it. Ooh, that feels good.
Look, we're all guilty of it, but fighting against it, I think, is as I sit here with a martini, but like fighting against it is, I think, an important factor in the whole thing. But the few originally, when the guy who invested in the film had come to me to say, "Hey, would you like to make a film about this book?" One, I read the book and I was like. I didn't think it was that I didn't think it was really. I didn't see it immediately, and I didn't know how you would take that and make it into a film. But it also seemed, as I looked at the fan base and the people who were so ravenous about this thing, it seemed like it was a bit cultish, and that there was at least a cult of personality around it that I was uncomfortable with, because I think that it's better to, there were the 7 principles, as you call them, were things that I kind of understood from early childhood. I didn't need anyone to teach them to me. I would say I'm an accidental Buddhist. Like, I don't need Buddha to tell me to be, to do those things. So I originally was just like, I don't see a way that this could work, and like, and he came back and he said, you can do whatever you want, and you can do it however you want to do it, and you have complete creative freedom. And you tell an artist they have complete creative freedom, and there's not an artist on earth who's not going to take the bait. And so I took the bait, and I said, okay. And I didn't, when I took the bait, I didn't have a plan. Like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just kind of sat on it. And then you have that imposter syndrome. Next thing you know, I'm in Egypt, like, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, holy shit, what the fuck am I doing? I'm climbing the pyramids and I have no fucking idea what the hell I'm doing. But I think that's the best place to start, is in like the deconstruction of the architecture. Like, what am I doing here? And then you eventually land on the ground, like, and you start putting that back together, and reconstructing it in a way that actually, hopefully people can react to, and anyone I showed the film to seems to enjoy it, or at least get something from it. It's not a party film. You don't throw a party and show it.
Yeah. Well, we have a clip of the first the center thing. The it's almost like the break in chapters or whatever you. Yeah.
I call it the alchemical wedding sequence. I don't know why I call it that, but I'll explain.
All right, so let's add this to the stream. We'll go like this, so we can hear.
So cool.
We can hear you. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this.
So weird.
So it's kind of a trip.
Well, in some ways, yeah, I guess it's like, it's partially inspired by the psychedelics, and when I decided to do those sequences, and there's 7 in total throughout the film, for each of the 7 principles, I came up with this wacky, weirdy scenario. Part of the do whatever you want thing was like, well, part of what I want to do is whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a kind of self-consuming serpent, but it's what any artist ever wants. It's like, I want to do whatever I want to do. And so I just do what I guess you'd call like trance drawings, and came up with these characters and, just thought like, what can we do that would just take this film and make it something beyond what it is, and give it some kind of supernatural power? Well, I think the only way that you can do that, and there's a lot of talking in the film, but the most purest form of communication, in my opinion, are symbols. because, like, I don't know if you've read Carl Jung, and Carl Jung will speak about symbols a lot, and like he'll how we all interpret things in a universal way and in an individual way, and so there's something really powerful about symbols, right? So I didn't even know what those sequences meant. They were just autonomous. They had their own life, their own meaning. I worked with my good friend Shane Morton. Have you seen Mandy? I don't know if you know the cheddar mac and cheese goblin. He designed him. He's kind of a visual effects guy. If you ever saw that viral Too Many Cooks video, where it's just an endless stream. But he's like this crazy effects artist in Atlanta who I've been friends with forever. He's always done my effects. And I was like, let's just do whatever we want to do. And let's, like stream of conscious.
Yeah.
But on film. Because those are the moments that people, and then somebody on set was like, it's the tarot. And we're like, what do you mean? And we're like, well, it's tarot. It's like the tarot cards. It's the man and woman, and they're constantly in these things. And it's like, what are you talking about? And then he showed me pictures of the tarot cards, and I was like, holy shit, that's exactly what it is in a weird way. And the whole point of tarot, which is in the film, is it's a cathedral of symbols, as she says. It's symbology, and you take what you need from it. And it's meant to confuse you, and it's meant to not make any sense. Because if you start, and our alchemist in the film, Brian Connoir, says, when you start making sense of something, you're no longer looking at it, which means you think you have it figured out, but you don't have it figured out. It's what we've been talking about this whole time.
Yeah.
You think you've got it. When you think you've got something, you don't have it. It's when you lose control of it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. I thought it was, when I looked at them, I just immediately what came to my mind is Adam and Eve.
Yeah. Well, it's that too, right? It's binary. It's that whole, which, Adam and Eve get a really bad rap. Like, it's because it's been co-opted by so many different religions or so many Christian sects and whatever. But Adam and Eve really just kind of, to go on like a philosophical rant, the devil gets the worst rap because he was not the devil. And I've written about this. The serpent in the Garden of Eden was not the devil. That it was the devil when it gets down to, the biblical times and whatever. But it was just a serpent, and serpents, by and large, had always been a symbol of knowledge, and if you look at Mesoamerica and you look at the shamanic cultures, the serpent was always the bringer of facts, the bringer of truth. It's only until you get to the New Testament that it's cast them out. Which again, I don't believe very much in any of that stuff. But yeah, Adam and Eve.
No, I was going to say the WHO uses a serpent in its logo. Right.
Well, it all goes back to that odd. And there's a great book, and I encourage you highly to read it, especially as someone who's interested in psychedelics, called The Cosmic Serpent, written by Jeremy Narby, who's a colleague of mine. And he accidentally, as an anthropologist, stumbled upon ayahuasca, which nowadays is almost dime store. But when he'd become sick while doing his research in the Amazon, and the medicine people were like, well, we can help you if you don't mind using our medicines. And they gave him ayahuasca, and he had this transformative experience and couldn't grapple. He just grappled for years with what was this experience. And he realized it was serpents climbing ladders, and his awakening, so to speak, which he wouldn't even call it that. But what he wrote about the cosmic serpent is it's DNA. It's the DNA strand. It's the double helix.
Okay.
And it's everything you see. And he's like, you find it everywhere. Whether it's the snakes climbing circling around the ladder, like you see in the WHO, or ancient symbols, this and that. It's all the DNA. He goes and he's a master storyteller. This is not a boring book. It's like Indiana Jones style. The journey he goes on is amazing. And he even says, like, this is, it's a flawed theory, but it's his experience.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's fascinating. And the whole thing is that DNA is that's what we are. Right.
Yeah.
It's so pervasively visualized that's what it looks like. The double helix. It's just the spiraling staircase, serpents. So there's me going off topic.
Well, that's what we are. We're DNA and we're stardust.
Well, we also think, like we're I think we always, the past 100 years have been 100 years of, we know everything, we have everything figured out. And if I don't know it, someone else does. And I trust them. And it worked for a little while. And I think it still works to a large degree. There are, I like to think you can trust more people than you can't trust. You can't get too bogged down in conspiracy.
Yeah.
It certainly appears that, that the opposite is true. But you walk around the street at any given moment. I always say, like, I've never met a person I didn't like, but I've met people I hate. I like the person, but I hate the people.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. Like, if I look at a dust cloud of human beings, I'm disgusted by them. But if I plucked one of them out and I sat face to face with them and had a conversation with them, I find something I love about them.
Yeah.
And without fail. Only on the smallest amount of occasions has it happened that I've said that person has no soul. And who am I to decide that?
Yeah. No, you're right. And Kybalion is the film, and it releases tomorrow.
Yeah, unbelievably.
So tell everybody where they can find that, because we're coming up on an hour, and I have a 6 p.m. I gotta run straight to after this. Man.
It's all digital platforms: Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, YouTube. But for now, it's behind a pay. Like, it's for sale. I believe there'll be DVDs available if you're still into physical media, which I personally am. And, it's one of those films I think people are going to hate or they're going to love. Yeah. I don't think there's going to be an in between. I hope that you fall into the latter category. I hope that we're not talking because you hate it.
Oh, no. I saw it. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. I think it's not for everybody. I didn't make it for everybody. I made it for, you do with your podcast. You make it for whomever. So I appreciate you doing this, man. I love this conversation. I love having these kind of conversations.
No, me too. I was going to get a little bit into something else, but a lot of times on my show, I just kind of go where it goes. Where the conversation where the conversation takes us, it takes us. And let me remember to drop some of the stuff we're actually here for in between.
Yeah. I just loved it. I just love talking to people, man. And, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, you too, man. I definitely appreciate it. And thank Sylvia, mutual friend, for hooking us up and showing me that and allowing me to take a look at that. And that was awesome, man. I definitely appreciate it.
Excellent, man.
So all of the links and everything will be available in the show notes or in the description. So what I'm going to need from you, and I'll send you a link to a guest form that I forgot to have you fill out, but it gives you all the links and everything else that I need to build that description.
Let me know. And then I'll share I'll share whenever it's available. I'll share wherever I can.
Awesome.
And, it'll be fun. All right. Thank you so much, man.
All right, Ronnie. I appreciate it, man. Have a good night, brother.
All right. Later, Sean.
All right. Well, That was a great conversation. Yeah, I had a long conversation with him on the phone, and yeah, we really kind of sort of hit it off, and we're talking about some stuff. And yeah, so I need to move on to another one. I have another scheduled interview after this. If you getting any value out of what I'm putting out or what I'm doing here, do me a favor and let's trade some value for value. If you can't financially afford to help support the show, then share the show with people that you think might be interested in it. Tell a friend. Put some people over my way. You have any questions? You want to get in touch with me? You want to have some guest suggestions? Feel free to reach out at nowheretogobutupnow@gmail.com. Other than that, keep it 100. Stay true to yourself. Everything else is just noise.
You've been listening to the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. Sean is a single dad, a union blue-collar guy, and he spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. When he was released from prison in 2006, all he had was the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and some paperwork. Since then, he's turned his life around and shares the struggles and successes on this podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you were moved. To connect to the show, book a guest spot. For merch, Patreon, PayPal, and social media links, go to linktr.ee/nowhere to go but up. On Instagram at Nowhere to Go But Up Now. On Twitter at But Up Now. On the YouTube channel at Nowhere to Go But Up Podcast. See you next time.